So the Mini Cooper, actually, the design of Mini Cooper is modeled after a boxing glove, and how there is so much power packed in this boxing glove that the shape of it mimics one part of the glove, and it's a subconscious triggering. The power that this little car has becomes then something which becomes believable. Because when you look at Amul girl, she was somebody who made fun of everyone. She got away making fun of Indira Gandhi during emergency, and she made fun of everyone. She never got sued. So how did she get away with it? And really, you think about it, she really was the naughty child who loved butter. And therefore, she was the metaphor for everything divine about this naughty child who loved butter. She was Bal Krishna. Yeah, a lot of brands come to Nykaa first. A lot of international brands come to Nykaa first because the content Nykaa creates for their brand is sometimes far better than the content the brands themselves have. From being a provider, a protector, and a procreator, I think men need to move to a place where they're companions, collaborators, and contributors. Piece of content that was made, and I remember, Falguni asking, "Should we run this?" It was about this woman who comes home and finds another woman's clothes which are lying, and her husband is supposed to be home, and she thinks that he's cheating on her, but when she walks in, she finds that he's actually a cross-dresser. It cuts to a later stage in life when they've obviously moved on separately in life, but they become the best of friends, and she really embraces his difference. And as a brand, I think Nykaa did these very edgy things, which pushed boundaries. I got rusticated from school. We blew up a teacher's desk by bursting a cracker in her table. We did not think it would do what it did. It smashed it to smithereens.
Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Jasravi. Conversations that are on the edge with thought leaders from the branding, marketing, and the business world. Conversations that ignite new ideas. Ideas with rough and sharp edges. Hello, Alpana. Welcome to my show.
Hi. Great to be here.
Yay. Okay. When I was reading about you, and when I figured that, you are on the startup path, and just, a few years back you started, I can't tell you how inspired I was, how admirable that is. And that's what we will start talking about. You know how inspiring that would be for all women professionals. So, Tiivra, when you started Tiivra, what was the need gap you saw, when trying to understand young men in the biking ecosystem, how the masculinity codes were evolving, cultural shifts, when it was our relationship to luxury was changing, even women, how they see their roles. So a lot was going on, as you have talked about on many platforms. So if you could just share with us, what were these shifts that you decided that Tiivra is going to meet that need?
So I think the journey didn't really start with a specific product in mind. I grew up in Delhi and had 2 daughters. I also worked on a ton of women's brands. So I used to head marketing and merchandising for Tanishq at one time. I've been associated with Nykaa from its earliest days. Falguni is a classmate. Mentored Carrot Lane from the start. So I didn't have any empathy group for young men while I was growing up. And it was only much, much later, about 10 years ago, that we were doing some work for PepsiCo, where I was working on a repositioning exercise for Pepsi in India. And I must have talked to, met, researched over 3,000 young men. And that's when I realized that almost all the conversations about how this generation of young women can be different from their mother's generation was being had with young women. And there was really nobody talking to young men about how they could be different from their father's generation. And I met a lot of young men who had, very different paths and trajectories. We were doing a rural study, for example, and we met a lot of young men in different parts of rural India who said कि कुछ भी करना है, लेकिन they don't want to be like their fathers. They don't want to be like their uncles. खेती नहीं करनी, but not just kheti. As people, they don't want to be like them. They wanted girlfriends. They wanted relationships which were different. They wanted a life which was different. And I always felt that there was no path, being shown, or there was no idea of how the new young men could evolve. And that's where I felt there was a gap. So that's really what brought me here.
You beautifully talked about how the society looks at men only as providers, and which is very limiting. But there is a shift there. They need to be different, and they want to be playing different roles. So if you could talk about that.
Right. Yeah, they grew up pretty much thinking that they had to be protectors and providers. And I think the shift that I believe that young men need to make is to be companions and collaborators. And that's, of course, in relationships with women. But there is also, I believe, another shift that's taking place. So I met this young man who then later joined my team, and he was, he was 29 then, and he started learning to ride a bike at that age. He was not terribly tall. He was about as tall as me, which is about 5'4". He rode some really tall bikes. He fell off them. He got back on again. And he was relating a time when he was in a situation where, with his friends and cousins and all, he was put in a situation where he was expected to fight. And he didn't fight. And he says, to date, they call me Parfattu. They call me a coward. But he was anything but, because of the way in which, he took a salary, a 50% salary. He took a huge cut in his salary to come and join a startup, which was very risky. And so the meaning of courage today is different. I think the meaning of power, the meaning of honor, a lot of these are very, very different. And, so I really felt that there was a role for a brand to talk to young men about how they could celebrate that difference and actually be themselves. There are so many brands that talk to young women about who they can be, starting from Dove, which says, we love you just as you are, to many other brands that have representations of women in all body shapes, all skin types. There is no particular expectation from them. But when you start looking at men, there is so little that's telling them that, it's all right to be as you are. And I think that continues to keep a huge pressure on men. And I think, if nobody else is stepping up, it's time brands did.
Isn't that beautiful? So, the 3 C's that you talk about: collaborator, companion, contributor. Why can't we look at men in that way? And you're so right. The other day, incidentally, you're talking about Dove, Alpana. I came across this ad of Dove Men Care, and I kind of clicked the link. I went on the Unilever page where they were talking about healthy masculinity codes, and there were 10 listed, and within that there was be vulnerable, be empathetic. So I was like, wow.
So this is very threatening to men. Alternative to being the masculine, which has now been termed as being toxic masculinity, the alternative seems to be this namby-pamby, diaper changing, doing things for his mother and wife and taking care of baby kind of man. And there isn't a semblance of masculinity in that. The shift is almost total, where he has to be this new metrosexual and he has to leave his masculinity behind. And I really have a hypothesis as to why So many men are gravitating towards facial hair. It's an expression of masculinity. It's a very superficial expression, but nonetheless it is. And I think men are looking for something which is their own, which is not where they have to be more and more like women. I think riding is one such expression of masculinity. Increasingly, it's an expression of a kind of individuality which even women, are today riding and are expressively riding. So I think masculinity as we know it will become a type of person rather than be very gender based. Nonetheless, I think it needs boundaries, it needs to be defined. And yes, you're right. From being a provider, uh, a protector, and a procreator, I think the men need to move to a place where they're companions, collaborators, and contributors.
Yeah, absolutely. So as they're trying to find an expression of masculinity, biking has taken on a new meaning, and then hence there are new codes of biking as well, which Tiivra is tapping into. And I really loved, somewhere you mentioned that this is a bike for the Eklavya mindset, and how it's passion based biking. So, if you could talk about the new kind of biker, because you beautifully said that there is the gender is also a spectrum now, and yet there are
Yeah.
some boundaries. So, men, women, all getting into biking for the individuality expression or the gender expression. How is it getting manifested?
Let me look at motorcycles. And the traditional tropes of motorcycles was that it was a very, very masculine activity. The bike was referred to as a she, the very act of riding it. It had a lot of undertones about what a bike represented. And very often, men would have a name for it, and typically it would be a girl, it would be a feminine name. Um, and biking was about power. So when men sat on bikes, most popular bikes used to be what are called the cruisers, where you're sitting at a 90-degree angle astride a bike, pretty much how power play used to be on horses. And there was a very clear sort of there was a very clear hierarchy in terms of what makes a better biker. So either you had a biker who sat on a cruiser, or you had a biker who had a super bike, a bike which is over 1000 liters, an extremely powerful bike. So there was power between the legs, or there was this bike where they were sitting in this very powerful stance. That was pretty much what bikers were. And those were the bikers who were looked up to, who were rewarded. There are events such as the India Bike Week, where either you're a super biker or you have a cruiser, and then you get parking inside. And all the other bikers who have a 200cc plus bike, where they're sort of hunched forward. They're more speed freaks rather than looking for just mere power, who go for shorter runs rather than the long rides all the way to Ladakh and Sikkim and so on. Um, these kinds of bikers are emerging. They are the ones who go for the short chai pakoda rides, they go on weekend rides, and they are not really defined by the size of their bike. They are defined by agility much more than the power of the bike. They're defined by balance, control, and speed is just a byproduct, but they're not really gunning for speed as a super biker would. These 200 plus bikers are looking to ride to be free. They are not encumbered by the size of the bikes. The size of the bike doesn't determine how much of a man they are or how good a biker they are. And all of this, I think, is a new kind of conversation that's emerging in riding. They're no longer getting slotted. So when we started talking to our consumers, to our riders in Tiivra, we identified our riders as not the Arjunas who were born with a silver spoon, who had an access to a big bike or an old time cruiser, um, or a Harley Davidson, but were people who bought a bike who started learning to ride, who were hungry to learn, who were learning from YouTube, who were watching other bikers, joining riding groups. And that really became the biker we spoke with, who's the Eklavya, who's driven by passion and not so much as what is expected of him in the world of biking. And he's making his own rules as he's going along.
So, individuality and biking. I mean, in that space, so much is happening. Like we talk about newer generations, they're all about individuality. I say Gen Zs are born self-actualizers. What we become at maybe 40 or 50, our earlier generations, Gen Z is already that individuality is, working. So, yeah, good days for biking.
Absolutely, absolutely, and they're very expressive.
Yeah.
So you will see them on Instagram, you will see them on YouTube. They are starring in their own life, and they want to document all of this. So every ride gets documented, every piece of gear that they wear is documented. Their own knowledge and understanding about riding, about bikes, about gear, they talk about it, and they're very, very vocal about it. So you will find older bikers who are not necessarily so expressive and not on such social media all the time, but the younger bikers, very, very much there.
Yeah, because exploration is so key to them. Exploring who they are is most important to them, and finding their own fam is most important to them. So they get to do all of that with biking. It's amazing. Okay, so since you talked about getting into the spotlight, we will talk about Nykaa. So, Alpana, you have had a 12-year association with Nykaa.
Indeed.
As an independent director. And I think people don't know, I mean, I didn't know that you suggested the name Nykaa, is it?
Yes, I did. I did. Falguni is a classmate of mine from Ahmedabad, and we were neighbors. We are neighbors still. And she would often come with this idea on an iPad when she started thinking about it. And when she was thinking of the name, we did a little brainstorm for her, and from that came the idea of, this young girl who wants to be a star. And so from Nayak and Nayika came the idea of Nykaa. And we spelt it differently because it's more ownable, it's unique, and so on. But yes, that was the genesis of the name, at least.
Yeah. So, and what an illustrious journey of Nykaa. Nykaa is really in the spotlight and become a star with, becoming listed company. Nykaa has been talked about a lot. There are so many people making case studies about Nykaa. We'll start with the very, base fundamentals. If you could share, what are the key success factors since you've seen and you've been involved throughout? And what differentiates Nykaa? What was the need gap that it, fulfilled, and also who it is for?
So if you have to go back to that time, maybe 12 years ago, 15 years ago, when beauty was, Lakme was, for example, a brand for beauty, and there were many other brands that had come, L'Oreal and so on. And beauty was rarefied, so the representation of this beautiful girl who was made up was somebody you looked at. And there was a distance between the gaze of the person looking at and this girl who was posing in this very beautiful fashion. And I think what Nykaa really did was to cut that distance of someone watching and seeing somebody who has been made up and so on, to actually doing it yourself. And it was remarkable because that was the time when social media was just beginning to explode. And women were taking to Facebook initially and then later Instagram, where they were putting themselves up. And Nykaa collaborated in that. It showed the ordinary woman how she could look more beautiful. In fact, I remember during COVID, they actually ran several pieces of content on how to make up for Zoom. And there were, and content and community. These were the two major pillars on which Nykaa just went hammer and tongs, reaching out to young women about how they could use makeup, how they could start looking beautiful, how it was no longer just a film star that they saw or a model that they saw. They themselves had access to that kind of beauty. They could start looking like that and become stars of their own life and truly become the Nykaas of their own life. I'll give you one incident. Carrot Lane, I've known Carrot Lane and very well, and I was talking to Mithun, who was the promoter of Carrot Lane. This was the time when Nykaa was actually listing. And Mithun said, it's amazing how the women in his office are following the listing and are rooting for Nykaa's success. They themselves are not investors, but they felt that this brand was theirs. And that is something Nykaa achieved. It became a brand for young women of India. And they could see themselves, they could see this brand almost holding their hand and taking them along on this journey.
Wow. Wow. And if it's in the DNA, how it shows. I mean, it's amazing, like you said, the founder's vision and how she saw the brand and how she felt that, this is what women want. The time has come. Or, I remember Alpana, I was working on brand Fair and Lovely long back. And, that was the time when it was going through transition. And this whole thing of the Bhabhi coming and handing the protagonist the cream, and then the cream is making her change. It's like an external agent. And it's like, no, time has come when the power has to be hers.
With her. Absolutely.
Lux at that point was also doing about, that also had to make this change. Mujhme star jagaye from
Sabun. Sitaro ka Sabun.
Yeah.
So I think it was the right place, right time. And this insight was extremely powerful.
Yeah, and it was there at the heart of the business model. So, not just in the communication or the brand. So, if you could talk about, there are a lot of things like it's gone omni-channel. The fact that, what is the acquisition or retention strategy? And even in terms of branding, content first, influencer strategies also evolved. So there are a lot of things Nykaa is doing which are exemplary. So where would you like to start? You can pick what you want to talk about.
I think content was its strongest point. I think earlier if you saw a representation of an ad of a mascara, right? You would have these wonderful eyelashes and you'll have this pack of mascara and this beautiful girl as the communication. But Nykaa actually showed how to apply it. And therefore, how can you use it? And therefore, a lot of the communication that Nykaa did was about how to and make the product accessible. And it wasn't just about how to use it, but with what do I use it? What is my look like? How can I get a look of this kind and so on? So there was so much that Nykaa did, which started building this out. I think that was really its largest pillar. And I think Nykaa was on top of data a lot. And so, therefore, how can you use data to create newer offerings? How do you create promotional calendars? All of that was a science almost. But I think at its heart was this idea of let's connect with this young girl. And very early on, just Ravi, there was this piece of content that was made. And I remember, Falguni asking, should we run this? It was about this woman who comes home and finds another woman's clothes which are lying, and her husband is supposed to be home, and she thinks that he's cheating on her, but when she walks in, she finds that he's actually a cross-dresser. And when she walks in, and then it cuts to a later stage in life when they've obviously moved on separately in life, but they become the best of friends, and she really embraces his difference. And as a brand, I think Nykaa did these very edgy things which pushed boundaries. It's not to say that the women who bought Nykaa themselves were like that, but they embraced a brand that was progressive, that was forward thinking. And I think Nykaa stood for that always. So these were some of the things. The other thing Nykaa did very early on was to start a Femina Beauty Awards. And they started giving away awards to brands which stood for beautiful products. And therefore they became almost like, they were people who understood beauty, such that they were competent enough to get beauty awards. So I think those were the kind of things Nykaa did, which really helped them grow.
So community education, and I was reading Alpana, a lot of practice of making sure that there are authentic products, because when people buy online, sometimes the expired products come, or the fake, which has been such a big problem for beauty products offline also. And so there were new practices that they did, and the fact that they've gotten into fashion also, and there are private brands, along with many more international brands, which might be just making an entry through the platform. There is a trend towards premiumization also, even while making it accessible and democratizing as well. So,
Right.
it's like really, like one-stop shop, as the vision for beauty was for women, is being materialized. But are there any aspects you want to talk about here, or also how the dynamics are so different when it goes offline?
I think this was a pure business decision. Um, at the end of the day, a marketplace which is trading in products will only have a limited margin, right? So it's a trading margin, and therefore, if you want to increase margins, you need private label where you have higher margins. You need fashion, which as a category earns higher margins, even though it's a traded product. But they also have a lot of their own labels. So this is a long-term strategy for Nykaa to be a profitable company. I think a lot of startups just play the valuation game, and from whatever I know about Nykaa, they are not content at doing that, and they have a very, very strong profit oriented strategy in place, and they're working towards that.
Okay, fashion, I understand. Same TG, captive audience, make it available, so much brand credibility. But products for men, I mean, that is also coming. Is it because women are buying products for men as well?
Right. Yeah. No, so there's a Nykaa man, and I think that's a given. I mean, in every, Fair and Lovely, there were so many men buying it, so that they eventually launched a Fair and Lovely for men, right? Fair and Handsome, I think that's what it's called. So
Now,
I
yeah,
yeah, I think now it is, the name has changed.
yeah.
But yeah, so I think men have always been into beauty categories, and it's been surreptitious, and it's only now that people have come out, and now there are, you know, blackhead removers, and there are all kinds of different products that men are buying into. So I think that's something that's a given. It's still not a very big category from them, from what I understand. But I think, they have to be here. This is the future where this segment will also grow very fast.
But when it comes to fashion, is there a value proposition? Is there a unique differentiating aspect? Because there's so many players out there.
Yeah, a lot of brands come to Nykaa first. A lot of international brands come to Nykaa first because the content Nykaa creates for their brand is sometimes far better than the content the brands themselves have. And I think for an Indian market where there is so much to be understood about this category, and I think, this expectation that everybody knows what a BB cream is, or everybody knows what some rice water face mask is I think the beauty industries put these impossible standards upon women and men that they are supposed to know all of this. So I think Nykaa, that's really why a lot of brands come to Nykaa, because they actually talk to the Indian consumer um, as their friend and as their coach. So I think that's the strategy for them, and that's paid off so far. And I, assume it's going to keep working for them.
Okay, so great. So okay, from someone who has been on the trenches, what any important, significant memory of that time when you were associated with Nykaa? About marketing to women or beauty, anything that shifted for you personally in your relationship with beauty?
I thought, that a piece of content about that cross-dressing man was really quite a significant step that the brand took. And it exemplified the brand in so many ways as being really progressive, and being very, very inclusive. So, in fact, indeed, a lot of men, a lot of gay men, choose Nykaa as well because they see Nykaa as their friend. But equally, a lot of women who see themselves as being modern women, as being progressive women, regardless of what their own life circumstances are and how conservative their family is. Um, Nykaa for them stands for a very modern brand, and a brand for them, brand that actually can help them move from their life. So one of the things Nykaa had launched was this girl from every town. So there was, I think, a Jodhpur girl, and there was a girl from Kota, and there were girls from different small towns of India, um, wearing makeup, and I that uh, was the way in which Nykaa reached out to so many women across the country. That we are not just an elitist brand, which beauty brands tended to be, right? But we are a brand for you, and that changed things for them.
Thank you for highlighting that, because as you were talking, Alpana, I felt that they actually you know gave a heart and soul to the Nykaa. When they talked about these kind of values, because Nykaa is not just somebody looking great. She's compassionate. She's inclusive. She has a broad, open mind, and so that's amazing, actually. And when you were talking about makeup from the girls from tier 2, tier 3 cities, I was reminded about how I'd worked on Lakme, and there was somebody who shared the genesis of Lakme and how they had started in India with lipsticks, and how lipstick was not to be used by young girls, only married women. Like Indian cultural values were that certain makeup was forbidden.
Right.
It was to be used only after marriage, and it became legit. And here, the democratizing and accessibility is just happening at a very different level. It's like a cultural shift and a
It's a
cultural
shift.
formation.
Absolutely. I think makeup is no longer something that bad girls wear. So that has changed quite dramatically.
Yes, to makeup and beauty. Yeah, and beauty also is like now so deep. Okay, so now Tanishq, you worked with Tanishq and Nykaa again, and like you said, you worked a lot on marketing to women, young women, mature women, women across. So, and somebody guided me to this book, the Tanishq story, but it's quite a story in terms of how Tanishq went through,
Yeah.
brand became
Yeah.
more relevant, more modern, and so many experiments happened, and so much of trial and error happened because this was huge changes were happening. So, marketing to women, is there anything that you experienced, figured out? What kind of mistakes typically happen?
So when I joined Tanishq, I had been out of the country for about 10 years. Secondly, I myself was not very big in the jewelry category. I, I personally like silver jewelry, and I like jewelry that is a piece of self-expression. Um, the whole idea of jewelry it was an old world idea where it was the idea of Stridhan. So a woman's worth would typically come from how much jewelry she had, and how much, and if her husband gifted it to her or her in-laws gifted it to her, her value somehow was higher. And I think there's a new generation of women who are no longer defined by the jewelry they own. They're more defined by their education, what else do they do in life, and so on. So jewelry was, an adornment and not a sense of value for. And that transition was happening in India when I came on board in Tanishq. I think in trying to understand what was happening in that category, I did several things. I think one of the first things I would do was I started watching all the Indian soaps there were, and to see what was the role of jewelry, of course. And they were over the top stuff and so on, then all the all the soaps that you could see. I started, my entire team would read women's magazines, which were regional women's magazines, and we started seeing the representation of women. We started seeing how women were wearing gowns, and it could be Malayalam Manorama, or it could be, Grah Shobha. These were magazines which were more regional, but there was Vogue, and then there was the Indian version of Vogue, which had been Indianized. It had been made more palatable. It had less skin showing, and yet some showing. All of that came together to start creating a new way in which the Indian woman was emerging. And I think starting to read a lot of this, um, one started getting an idea of what the Indian woman today was. In any case, I think Tanishq had already been through an exercise where Santosh Desai and his team had worked on a repositioning of Tanishq as new tales of tradition. And it said that jewelry is a very traditional idea, but there is a twist and there's a Tanishq-ness to all of it. So even if it was a husband-wife relationship, there was the idea of a second marriage maybe embedded in it, or it was about a husband and wife where in anniversary he talks about how he's sorry that he's been working such long hours and he wants to celebrate her and some time with her. And these were, I think, new things that the brand started doing. That was the new tales of tradition that Tanishq stood for. um, at the same time, as a brand, the brand also said that we have to be the guard keepers. We have to be the guardians of traditions. So the entire Jodha Akbar collection, for example, was created at that time. We had gone into the coffers of Maharajas in Rajasthan who had 300, 400-year-old jewelry. We went to do research through Akbarnama and various miniatures of that time to recreate Akbar's sword, to recreate Jodha's jewelry. All of this came from a tremendous amount of research and integrity in creating this jewelry. So while on one side there was guarding various traditions, there was also talking to the woman, the new Indian, emerging Indian woman, about how she's different today and how jewelry today is more about where she is valued, not because of you know her being a passive wearer of jewelry and passive uh, person who accepts jewelry, but as someone who plays a very active role in life. There's one memorable ad of Tanishq where she is, she's obviously very, very wealthy. There's an old vintage car, and her husband to be is there in the car, and she takes over the wheel and she starts driving. So I think all of those were expressions of this new emergent woman.
That's a beautiful story, Tanishq. We've always loved the ads. They've always sparked a conversation, Alpana.
Right. I think the other things, we used to do some clever things, and it wasn't invented by me, but when I went there, I saw that, and we continued doing that. Is that the idea of the Tanishq woman was that um, she was just a little less ordinary. So she wasn't so extraordinary that she was out of reach, and but she was. So I remember we would sometimes use a Brazilian model who had the same skin tone as an Indian, but just her cheekbones were so different. And so when you saw the Tanishq woman, she would be styled like an Indian woman, but there'd be something different about her. And I think there were these small tricks that we played in the setting, in where where the photography was done, or what kind of jewelry was used, where there was the ordinary, and there was just this little extra that changed. There was this Tanishqness to it, which made it different. And I think that's a value that stayed with the brand for many years now.
Starting from the thought to execution to the protagonist in the commercial, you just stand up and notice, and then of course not just her but her actions and how she thinks. And here you have a new story with a new kind of Nykaa. Okay, so that's a theme with you, Alpana.
Yeah, I think a lot of women's brands have been part of my life. So, yes.
Then there's been a very interesting phase of your life, which is about design thinking, and packaging. And so this is so fascinating because consumer is so central to the whole thinking, their behaviors, their current habits, and and then building everything around it. So this is very fascinating. Which case studies would you like to share?
I was I was a suit that stumbled onto design. So I was a rare MBA in the world of design who headed a design firm. And I think when I did that, I found that design was a strategic business tool. You could grow market shares with design. I realized that packaging, for example, was a very under leveraged um, tool, or under leveraged design in design terms. So you would have clients who would come and say, "इसमें कुछ कर दो, इसको brand को refresh कर दो, may do something different here." And when you actually go deeper, you realize that depending on what your objective is, design needs to be totally different. If your objective is, say, to gain market share, then you have to be a product that wins at the shelf. You have to be the best and the best chosen product on the shelf. So, if your story is ingredient led, your ingredients have to pop the most, they have to look the most delicious. If your product is supposed to be premium, then you need to have codes of premium. In India, just having a gold on your pack actually makes it fundamentally premium. So there are multiple ways in which you can do that. But if your requirement is that you really want to, so it's not market share, but you want to create a new category, then your product needs to educate. Then your product needs to really insert itself in the consumer's mind. So I remember years ago we had done some work for Bar One. It was a Nestle chocolate, and they had come to us with an idea saying, this is our advertising agency's idea, and we want to keep that idea and put it in the pack and so on. And we tried to understand Bar One, and we realized that Bar One is very much like a five-star. Five-star used to be 15 or 17% of the entire chocolate market at that time, whereas Bar One was less than 1%. And whereas five-star had a huge advertising budget, Cadbury used to spend a fair amount of money on five-star, Bar One had no budget whatsoever. So we told them that, look, the first thing you need to do is get consumers to understand that this is a product very much like a five-star. Till you don't eat it, you don't know what's in it. So the thing that we did was to create, to show the product where you could see the product inside. You actually had to cut it open and you could see it, that you had that soft, chewy center inside, and it was very much like a five-star. The second thing we did was we just borrowed the codes, just as detergents, are blue, and say fairness creams are pink. A five-star was gold. And so we borrowed the gold of five-star, keeping a very unique design for Bar One. And yet we gave it that gold to cue the idea that it was a very similar chocolate to five-star. The brand grew 3 times without any advertising, just with this packaging change. So I think that was a very successful one. I think another really successful brand for us was Tata Copper Plus. So when they came to us, it was called Tata Water Plus, and there was this long list of ingredients. The long list of ingredients, the first one was zinc, the second was something else, third or fourth was copper, or fifth was copper. And we went back to them and said, there is no way you can actually sell water that has potency. Water is supposed to, in our world, cleanse. It has mythic properties, even if you just do the hair bath without any real washing. Water is supposed to cleanse. It strips away. It, does not, it washes away. It washes away your sins also. I mean, it will definitely wash away anything. So how do you make it believable that water will actually deposit minerals? Milk can deposit minerals, but how will water deposit minerals and vitamins? And that's when we looked at culturally, where did water have potency? And we found that there was either the spiritual water with some tulsi in it, or there was water in a copper lota. And this was a ubiquitous belief across India, where water in a copper lota had some potency. What it did, nobody knew, but it did something good for you for sure. And that's when we went back to the team and said, dial this up, make this your number one ingredient, and let's call it Tata Copper Water. And that's what it was called. That's how it was packaged. And a simple thing like that changed. They sold out. I mean, whatever that plant could produce, they sold out. They could command a premium on that water compared to other waters. So all of it happened. And I believe that the design industry has a lot of design awards, which are on aesthetics, which are on pretty designs that are bought by a small sliver of people who buy some kind of exotic green tea where the box looks fabulous. But if you started rewarding design basis business performance, I think the role of design as a strategic intervention would be so much more celebrated and so much more sought after, because it is design can do amazing things in from gaining market share to getting customers to shift their belief system entirely.
You know, riding on the belief system that exists, because you cannot really change it. You've got to work with it, and that's a beautiful example. The second one of what consumers believed, and hence you just picked up copper from the entire list and you said, okay, this is what we're going to highlight because it is already you know. Uh,
I have another one for you. I have
okay.
another one for you,
Yeah.
which is that we used to do a lot of work for Amul at one time, and I remember sitting in the Amul boardroom with their top management and discussing how the Amul girl had aged. She was already some 60, 70 years old, and is she relevant to the younger generation? And I was trying to decode what she stood for. So there is, when you're looking at something, there is the conscious mind, there's the subconscious mind, and then there's the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is looking at something literally and trying to make sense of it through a very literal process. It's a very linear linguistic process. Um, then there is the subconscious mind where we look into culture and we try and make sense of something. And then there is the unconscious where there's a deep rooted belief system that's sitting even deeper than culture. It's part of our primeval beliefs almost. So when you look at Amul Girl, she was somebody who made fun of everyone, from Godman to even Prime Minister Indira Gandhi during emergency. She got away making fun of Indira Gandhi during emergency, and she made fun of everyone. She never got sued in a country like ours, where we have a public interest litigation for everything and our sensibilities get offended. She never got sued, except once, which is a separate thing. So, how did she get away with it? And really, you think about it, she really was the naughty child who loved butter. And therefore, she was the metaphor for everything divine about this naughty child who loved butter. She was Bal Krishna. And now think about it. Think of all the dairies in this country who are called Krishna Dairy, who are called Gokul Dairy, who are called, so many dairies which are named after Krishna and the world of Krishna. And there is a metaphor of a girl that is not talking to you literally, to your neofrontal cortex, but is talking to your subconscious limbic brain with a metaphor which is not, nobody is going to sit and actually make that connection logically. But subconsciously, we have accepted her amazingly. That's the power of semiotics. Semiotics is the ability to create meaning which doesn't talk literally, but it triggers in the subconscious through a very strong cultural understanding of what is in that culture. Another example, a woman in red in a Western culture is this dangerous other woman, right? In India, she stands for everything auspicious. She's the Ghar ki Lakshmi. So the meaning that different colors or designs or patterns or symbols or icons have mean different things culturally. And that's really the power of semiotics. So I am a great believer of semiotics.
I am too. I had Seema Khanwalkar. She's a
I know she. I know her. Yeah.
Taught us in ORGMAR Semiotics and worked with us on some projects. So yeah, amazing and lovely examples. I'll just unpack a little. Alpana, if you have to add anything, please do. The first example, also the bar one. So like in behavioral science, we say the anchoring and the framing. So you kind of framed it along with what kind of a chocolate it is. And then within that, you created a uniqueness. So it came in the consideration set of the biggest market players. So, like you beautifully said, that packaging is a strategic tool, and it needs to be looked at that. And the third example you talked about, the Amul girl. I mean, that's amazing. Nobody's really thought of that. Why is it that she got away with and she is still doing it.
And she's still doing it. And she's still relevant. The other reason why the brand hasn't aged is because they're constantly rejuvenating the brand almost on a daily basis with, very, very current jokes. So she has not aged one bit. And she remains as popular as ever. So I think
the brand itself is making, such a huge effort to stay, innovative in every product category.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, amazing. I mean, I never really thought of this, the girl as the subconscious Krishna,
So brands created with a metaphor tend to be far more powerful than brands which are just in your face.
Yeah.
So, one of the more famous metaphor is the Mini Cooper. So the Mini Cooper, actually, the design of Mini Cooper is modeled after a boxing glove, and how there is so much power packed in this boxing glove that the shape of it mimics one part of the glove, and it's a subconscious triggering. The power that this little car has becomes then something which becomes believable, because you have something in your subconscious that's telling you, okay, I get that.
It makes sense.
It makes sense.
And if you have anything more to say about, anything that, as a woman professional, it's just so many women who don't go all the way, or who just find the fight too difficult because their life stages that are tough when they have to really, I mean, if there is a glass ceiling, there are kids, their parents,
Right.
there is so much that.
Yeah, so I had kids. I took a break when we went to the US. I was following my husband's career and job. The kind of work that I got there was not commensurate to what I could have done if I had been in India, and so on. So yes, I've had breaks in my career. It's been unconventional. I've done different things. But it's like you get lemons and then you make lemonade. You do the best that you can with what you have. I think I've been extremely fortunate that I've had breaks. It's very hard for women to take breaks in their career and come back. But I think charting your own journey is a very important path for women. And I encourage a lot of women who have quit working to go back to it. I don't think women realize that they have so much more to contribute, and the fact that they haven't worked for 8 or 10 years in between doesn't make them brain dead. On the contrary, there's a lot that they've learned. They could be, simply about how they manage inventory or how they're managing time. But even things like that can make them amazing managers. And I don't think women are celebrated enough. But I, at a very personal level, find the gender divide, especially in management, very annoying. It's like World Chess Championship. What is that really? What is a World Chess Championship for women? I mean, how does it have to be different? I think similarly, when you have ET awards for women or you have some other awards for women, it's about good management or it's about a company that's done well. So, I feel that being this token woman, independent director, being this whole, it actually does a disservice to the gender. I guess there is some amount of a requirement to ensure that women are included, but the backlash is that a lot of times you're considered to be, and maybe not me personally, but a lot of times women are considered to be the token woman, or to be have got special. She got the award because it was a special category kind of thing, rather than it just being gender awards.
Are you ready for our rapid fire, Alpana?
Good Lord, that's scary. So, yeah.
Okay. So, alternate profession could have been?
Dancer.
Okay. Mother's best advice?
Mother's best advice was that the rules are the same for my brother and I. And I think she just opened up a world for me very early on where there were no constraints for me.
Okay. What would you do on Mars for fun?
I would eat up all the Mars bars, and which I love actually. And then maybe look at Earth and see if I can have a party in Mars where I would call people from Earth.
Please invite me as well.
Yeah, parties up.
As per your spouse, your most often used phrase?
Go shine.
Nice. One thing no one knows about you.
So I meditate. I do Vipassana quite regularly, and I think what pulls me is the 10 days of complete silence. So I seek silence.
Okay. What's something new happening in your life right now?
So Tiivra, and there is of course lots of new products, new markets. We are on the cusp of a certification that will open 47 countries to us. So we will. My fervent desire is to be a global brand. I believe that there aren't too many Indian brands that have really been global, the Indian consumer brands. And I would very much like this brand to be a global brand.
Okay. I have to ask, so did MS Dhoni happen?
Sorry?
MS Dhoni? You wrote to him?
And so Dhoni wears our helmet all the time. Anytime you see him on social media, we constantly see him. I want him so much on board as an investor. He loves bikes, and he's the kind of biker we love. He's a biker who rides a 100cc bike and a 200cc bike as much as he rides his 1200cc bike. And he's somebody who understands, um, deeply what different bikes need to be ridden and how.
What is your favorite childhood memory?
Yeah, I think it's favorite. I got thrown out. I got rusticated from school. We blew up a teacher's desk by bursting a cracker in her table. We did not think it would do what it did. It smashed it to smithereens. I think it was simply trying to be cool and um, but we got into a lot of trouble, and I was made to sit outside the principal's office for I think a couple of days. So yeah, so that was one, and I think
love it that it's your favorite memory. The visual was amazing.
I think it's all right to break some rules, and I think when you break rules is when you move out of boundaries that the world chooses to put on you. And I think women particularly have so many boundaries put on them.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to devote the rest of your life to philanthropy, what cause would you choose?
So, of course, the easiest is the girl child. But I'm really moved by older people. And I think dignity in death and dignity in old age is a very important value for me. So that's something I would work on.
How would you like strangers to remember you?
I don't particularly care to be remembered. I think it's all right to be not remembered.
Okay. What is one missed opportunity you wish you could have a second chance at? Is there one?
Oh, I'd wanted to be an astronaut.
Yeah.
And go in space. So I guess Mars was at one time a calling. Unfortunately, it was something that it was just a childhood dream. Like kids want to be pilots, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Is there a way people can reach out to you? What would be the best way?
Oh, LinkedIn.
Yeah,
LinkedIn. I'm reasonably regular on LinkedIn. If somebody writes to me, I will respond for sure. Might not be the same day, but I think it's amazing the amount of research you've done about the person, but about ideas and about concepts, about not just research. I know we had a conversation earlier where you probe not deeply. This is, completely off the cuff, but you probed enough to direct the kind of questions you would ask, and this is rare. I see business. I meet business journalists all the time, and I find a lot of lazy journalism. So it's interesting to see a podcast where you have so much research that goes into it. But more than that, I think the kind of probing that you do is more than the obvious kind of questions. It's not just a regurgitating of facts and so on, but you try and get into the meaning of things. So I think this would be a very interesting podcast to follow. And I'm really curious to see what you're going to do next.
Yeah.
But well done, you. And I'm for one, I'm going to subscribe.
Yeah. Okay. Pressure on me now. Thank you so much, Alpana. It was amazing. I'm rooting for Tiivra. Another Indian Sanskrit name has such a lot of meaning and evocative images. And I'm rooting for MS Dhoni. And I read that,
if any of the viewers can bring him on board as an investor, I would be thrilled, absolutely beyond thrilled.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. It was absolutely delightful to be here, and thank you for your questions. They were really, really incisive.
Thank you so much.
All right.